Okay, this is GamerBlave and we're back with True Remembrance. And if you've missed the last couple of videos, a lot has been happening. And just to kind of fill you in, first of all, I would actually suggest going and checking those out if you are actually interested in the story, because it is kind of a lot to sum up in a little bit without making these videos ridiculously long. But Lips did come in the last video. I'll get to that in a second. But Law said goodbye to Blackiris. It was either the last video or the video before. And I had speculated what that was going to mean. But turns out that she apparently skedaddled and got out of there. And so when Blackiris went out to go shopping, so Blackiris went out and bumped into Lips and Rook at Aroma, and they informed him that Law had met up with Dexter at the trolley station. Now, at this point, I can only assume that Dexter's motives in this are not particularly pleasant, and I'm not entirely certain what Law's motives are, because it would seem that Law would know that Dexter and Blackiris don't really like each other, and that that Dexter has malintent towards Blackiris, and that since she cares for Blackiris, that she wouldn't want to do anything negative towards him. So I'm not exactly sure what her complete intentions in hooking up with Dexter are, because it seems like she just wanted to kind of get out of there, potentially to avoid losing her memory, because she was saying remember. She wanted to remember, right? And going through the mnemonicide protocol meant that she was going to forget. At least that's what I'm thinking. So we don't. I don't know. We're gonna go ahead and see. But anyway, that's what's going on. She's with Dexter, at least allegedly. That's what we've heard, right, from Lips and Rook. Now, Blackiris then gets into this haze. He's in this funk, and they kept dropping these hints of he's not really on his A game, and he just kept feeling weird and stranger and stranger. And not going into all of the details on that, definitely, if you want to see more of that, check out the last episode. But he gets back to the house and just collapses, and that's kind of the page we're on here. I think that I read this one in the last one, but we'll start with this one. And he's struggling to remember things that are in his memory. He feels like he should know them, but they're fleeing away from him. And I was saying in the last one that I thought that he should know them, or or rather that it's possible that this is something that's a side effect of what mnemonicides experience after they do what they do for so long, or rather that this is actually what it's like to have the mnemonicide protocol enacted upon you, and that maybe this is something that Dexter is doing to him somehow. So I don't know. I'm not sure if what he's experiencing right now is real. I mean, maybe this is some kind of a dream. I'm really not sure. But anyway, that's kind of where we are right now. That's kind of setting the stage for this one, if you missed. And also, that's kind of like letting me, after it's been a while since I've recorded the last one, kind of letting me, spew forth what I've been thinking and meditating on for a little bit. So, kind of two birds with one stone there. So let's proceed here. Somehow I knew, if I just closed my eyes, all this pain would disappear. And I also knew that this was probably for the best. If I were your teacher, I'd be really happy if you came to visit. Okay, next time, when we get the chance, I hope. I'm sorry, Blackiris, I'm so sorry. I blinked. Things were blurry, but I could see that someone was there. A girl. Someone I thought I knew, maybe. When she saw me, she broke into a run. She skidded to a halt before she'd covered half the distance between us. But then something strange happened. She hesitated for a moment. She pursed her lips. She took a step forward, another, and another. She sat on the floor next to me. She gently cradled my head and set it on her lap. And then she started, slowly, as if I would break if she went any faster, brushing the snow out of my hair. You should sleep a bit. It'll make things easier when you wake. I knew her. It had to be, but how come I couldn't remember a thing? She'd continued brushing my hair. Now she was singing softly into my ears. What has he just experienced? I mean, oh my gosh, what has he experienced? I knew this song, but I'd never heard it sung so lovingly. This soft voice, these warm hands. I went completely limp. I had no more strength. But I didn't care. I was not going to sleep. Not until I remembered who she was. Remember, damn it! I reached out. I felt something. Sharp fragments of glass. Good, good. I took them up and squeezed as hard as I could. I felt the glass digging into my palm. I was losing blood, but I was gaining consciousness. Law? I finally managed. Her eyes narrowed. Her mouth shaped itself into a smile. It's okay. I'm right here, so don't be afraid. The Dolor, Pneumocides, Psyche Corrosion. Don't you get scared? Whoa. Okay, I can't read all that stuff that quickly, but evidently lots of thoughts just rushed through his mind really quickly. It was just really, really fast and furious, and the last thing was get away from me. I think that was the last thing that flashed up there. But just a really frantic feeling there. And I mean, I can't even imagine just waking up and not really having your memory, but then, you know, having, I guess, this rush of sensations and emotions, especially, being so, being so intent on remaining conscious that you are, you know, literally, driving glass into your palm. I mean, it's just got to be an intense experience. I could see clearly now. Law wasn't my patient this month. I was hers. This girl removed the psyche corrosion inside me. Every last trace of it. Every last trace, that is. Except for its name. Law. I knew her. Yes. I'd met her a month ago outside of this house, but that wasn't the first time. Back then. What is going on? Of a Cat in the Rain, where the story ends. Back then, it was still autumn. The air was crisp. The winds were cool. It rained all day and all night. On some days, the curtain of falling water was so dense that you could hardly see past your nose. I could sit for hours at a time as the rain tap danced on the roof and ran down the windows. I was never bored. But a quite different kind of tapping broke my reverie today. So someone was at my door. How unusual. I never got guests. A man I'd never seen before was standing there when I opened up. His black business suit was slick with rain. He reached into his pocket and whipped an official-looking badge in front of my eyes before I could say a word. "Sorry to bother you, sir. Have you by any chance seen a suspicious-looking person around this area?" "What? Other than you?" That's what I wanted to say, but he didn't look like he was joking, so I kept my mouth shut. "I don't think so. Could you describe him for me?" "Sure." Then he brought one of his hands to about chest level, drew a line. "A young girl, about this height." "Uh-huh. So that's your suspicious-looking person, not just a runaway or anything like that." "Something like that." The man smiled a little at this and nodded. I shrugged. "Well, in any case, haven't seen anyone like that around here." "I see." The man turned and walked down the stairs. I watched him until his figure disappeared around the corner, then went back inside and closed my door. Man, talk about a close shave. A suspicious-looking person. You've got quite a reputation. I remarked to the girl who was curled up in one corner of my room. She glared back. That was the only response she gave me. Well, that was quite enough. Rain was dripping from her hair and clothes onto the floor. There was quite a puddle in my room now, as a matter of fact. Okay, so let me see let me just take a beat here because I want to talk about what happened a few frames ago, because I'm okay. So Blackiris, when he encountered Dexter, said, Dexter said, "Are you here to see Maria?" I believe, right? And evidently Maria had been dead or gone for a long time. Now, are we now to understand that maybe the relationship or whatever between him and Law or whatever had been some kind of had actually been the some instance of him dealing with that loss of Maria. I mean, I don't know. I'm having trouble even forming my thoughts into some kind of coherent into any kind of coherent thought here. My thoughts into a coherent thought. Yeah, my thoughts are not coalescing into anything useful right now, so I guess I better just hold on to them. for a moment. But man, this is wild. This is wild. The role reversal frame a few frames back is definitely something that we need to visit. You know, I don't want to just say that wasn't significant. I mean, we definitely need to talk about that, and that's hugely significant. It's that I don't really have the capacity to just I guess ad-lib treat it with the significance that it deserves right now. Either my initial reaction is either Blackiris has been undergoing pneumonicidal treatment, the pneumonicide protocol, and as such, part of that is the fabrication of this story of him being a pneumonicide as treatment of his dolor, or Dexter is just screwing with his brain right now and has created this situation as part of it. Those are my two prevailing theories right now, but let's go ahead and proceed here. Gee whiz. I sighed as I walked toward her. She shrunk back at my approach. Now she was backed up against the wall with no place to go. With that glare superglued on her face the whole time, great. What did she think she was? A frightened kitten? She was certainly acting like one. Don't worry, you're safe. It's just that you can't stay in that corner forever. My floor, well, at least that one patch of it, was slick with moisture by now. She must have been out in the rain for hours. Besides, she was shaking right now, obviously. That was from the cold as much as from the fear. You're just going to catch a cold like that, you know. I tossed a towel in her direction, but she didn't so much as move a muscle to pick it up. She just kept glaring at me, so I just kept glaring back. She'd been like this ever since I found her. I'd found her huddled in the alleyway behind this apartment complex about an hour ago. I took her in immediately and hid her, as it was obvious that the officials were after her. I had no love for the investigative bureaus, you see, and I really had no tolerance for their black-suited goons. Anyway, yeah. Ever since I took her in, she hadn't really moved a muscle. No gratitude, no explanation, not a single word from her mouth. And I was starting to get really fed up with this stalemate. So I walked right up to her and knelt so I could reach her. Before she could so much as try to bolt, I covered her hair with the towel and started drying her off, roughly. She let out an unearthly shriek and screwed her eyes shut. The towel was quickly soaked through and through. Just how long had she been out there anyway? Anyway, this towel was toast now. I tossed it into my laundry basket and sighed again. She just kept glaring at me. Now, she couldn't have intimidated a mouse if she tried, and I certainly didn't care that much anyway. But this was kind of getting depressing. So I shrugged and ran my fingers gently through her hair. Don't be afraid now. And I continued to brush her hair. It was like petting a frightened kitten. Really, this was completely unlike me. I could feel the tension leaving her body little by little. Now she was cautiously opening her eyes again. And now she was staring timidly up at me, so I withdrew my hand. Feeling a little better now? Then would you mind telling me why they're after you? The girl just shook her head silently. So she didn't know then. Either that, or she was lying, but I really didn't think so. No reason, eh? Or maybe they found you so fetching that they decided to stalk you. I shrugged lightly, but the girl didn't seem to get it. She cocked her head to one side and stared at me blankly. I smiled at this. She blinked once, twice, and smiled right back. Okay, let's see now. It doesn't look like you got the Dolor, and if I were to send you to HQ, they'd just lock you up. No point in sending her right into the arms of her would-be captors, after all. While I was thinking about what to do next, the girl quietly reached out. There was a sheet of paper in her hands. It was soggy and almost falling apart, so she'd been holding at this the entire time. But fortunately, I could still make out what it was. This is my address, isn't it? I murmured. I was starting to get a really bad feeling about this. The girl, on the other hand, looked about as surprised as I was. Her eyes kept flitting between the paper and my face. So you were told to come here, and you got lost, is that it? She looked up at me timidly. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then she nodded. Oh, great. This wasn't good. I dropped the paper onto the floor, screwed my eyes tightly shut, and put my head in my hands. I was starting to get a headache. I'd seen this handwriting before. I knew whose it was. Snaky consonants, half-finished vowels, carelessly slashed out punctuation. This had to be Annalie's doing. So was this one of Annalie's underlings, then? I mean, I suppose this could have been a niece or even a granddaughter, except I knew he didn't have any family. When I opened my eyes again, I found her staring down at the paper, looking worried indeed. Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to kick you out. You can stay here until Annalie comes. That is, if you want to. The girl looked lost in thought for a second, then she bowed deeply. I guess this was her way of saying, thank you very much. All right, let's see. You might want to take a shower now. You're soaked after all. Can you stand? The girl nodded. When she got to her feet, my mouth fell open. I stared at her until I realized what I was doing. I quickly averted my gaze, soon thereafter. She was wearing almost nothing. I hadn't really noticed up until now because she'd been huddled off in the corner like that. And when I said almost nothing, I meant she was wearing what hardly amounted to more than underwear. If there was any silver lining here to be found, it was that I hadn't been slapped to death yet. Tell me, did you bring any other clothes? The girl stared back at me for a second, her head tilted to one side in thought. Then she pointed at a little bag sitting in the other corner of the room. So that was all the luggage she had, huh? The bag was so small that I doubted that there was anything of worth inside, let alone clothing. I see. Talk about a hopeless situation here. The girl just stared up at me. Clearly, she had no idea what was going on. Well, first things first, might as well show her to the bathroom, so I beckoned to her. She followed. I opened the door to the bathroom and gently pushed her inside. She offered no resistance. Feel free to use whatever you like. I'm leaving some towels here. I have to go somewhere in a moment now. I'll lock the door behind me. If someone knocks or buzzes, don't answer, okay? And with that, I walked back toward the foyer. I could hear loud crashing noises behind me when I left the apartment. Was she going to be all right? Well, hopefully she hadn't tripped and fallen or anything. I boarded the trolley and got off on 6th Street. Then I started looking around for some clothing my unexpected guest could wear, but, well, I didn't know much about this. I was totally lost. What was I supposed to do here? No, I wasn't being picky. I didn't care whether she'd like what I bought or not, but still. Anyway, it didn't take long for me to go, oh, to hell with this. After that, I started buying complete outfits off mannequin displays, whatever it took. I headed back to the station in the rain and wondered if she'd finished showering by now. Well, I was probably worrying a bit much. After all, anyone who was her age wouldn't have any problem doing that by herself, right? She'd never used my particular bathroom before, but come on. Yeah, she'd be fine. I don't know. She could be in shock. The authorities were after her. She was out in the rain. She was very scared. She could just be in shock, but she seemed like she was having a lot of difficulty just understanding anything that he was saying. Now, that could be just a language barrier. Maybe she literally didn't understand the words that he was saying, but, she's perfectly intelligent human being that just doesn't speak the language that he speaks. So that's another possibility. But I'm wondering if there's, something going on with her, like just an underdeveloped brain. Could be an experiment, and that's why they're after her. The brain of a child inside of the body of someone who's older than that. I don't know. So we're going to find out. Presumably, we're going to find out. The only thing I knew was this girl was weird, and one of Annalie's acquaintances on top of that. I'd have to be on my best behavior with her, otherwise Annalie was going to have my hide afterwards. 3 years had passed, almost to the hour, since I'd first met the man. It was raining heavily that day, kind of like how it was right now. I just received my license to practice in town, and indeed, I'd also just received my first assignment. In short, I was a newly minted mnemonicide in every sense of the word. I finally had what I'd fought so hard for: a comfortable job, a steady income, a roof over my head, food on the table. Yet now, that is all mine. Everything felt so empty. So I found myself in the back alleys of 5th Street, sitting under the eaves of a building and listening to the rain fall. It was a nice sound. I could have listened to it forever, and I would have, if not for the approaching footsteps. I had no idea what to make of this. No one came around these parts on sunny days, let alone rainy days like this. I raised my eyes anyhow. When I did, I saw an old man standing before me. He smiled at me and said, "A pity. So sad, so young, yet ready to kill himself. Tell you what, maybe this will cheer you up. I'll give you this here gun. Kill me first, then turn it on yourself." Whoa, whoa. What? Good heavens. Just random old man. Unprompted. Pump the brakes, dude. Gee whiz. I looked, and dear God, he really was holding a gun out to me. He didn't look like he was joking either. Now this was interesting. Interesting indeed. So I laughed a bit. "And who are you?" He smiled right back. He seemed harmless enough, but there was something in his eyes that put an end to my laughter immediately. "Annalie, that's my name. A pleasure, Blackiris." I recognized his name. Rather, I would have been an idiot not to have. Most of the books in the Academy's considerable library were written by him or someone with his exact name. "You're trying to tell me you're the so-called Alpha of Omegas. I'd never have imagined. But tell me, why do you know my name? Come now, routine lookup, nothing to it. He winked at me and smiled. Obviously, someone like him would have had access to every file in HQ, including mine. I know everything. Where you were born, how you survived, how you became a pneumonicide. It's all there, in the file. You really ought to look. Always nice to know that Big Brother is watching. Obviously, I wanted to avoid being reminded of my past, but when I turned to glare at him, I saw the most amazing thing on his face. His eyes were red, his cheeks were slick and heavy with the weight of tears. So I did the only thing I could do in that situation. I stared. A few seconds passed. Annalie looked at me with puzzlement written all over his face, but finally, he realized what was up. Oh, my apologies. No use. Watching an old man cry, waste of time. Don't mind me, I'll be fine. He wiped his eyes dry and smiled at me reassuringly. But I wasn't reassured at all. This guy was weird. It was only later that I realized that he'd saved me, in his own way. If it hadn't been for him, I probably would have never left that alley alive. Annalie dropped by my apartment every once in a while after that incident. It was never for any special occasion. He just came, talked about this and that, and then disappeared as suddenly as he arrived. He didn't say much, but it became rapidly obvious that he was always under surveillance. No wonder his stays with me were so short. For my part, I didn't think this was all that unusual. After all, Omegas were so rare that they might as well have been living national treasures. Well, if there was anything unusual about this whole thing, it was Annalie himself. I'd known all along that he was weird, yeah, but still, I'd never realized that he was a freaking pedophile. Whoa! Or something like that. And now I was getting depressed. What the hell did he expect to do, or me to do, with that girl in my apartment? The girl was out of the shower when I came back home. That was good. Except she'd gone back to cowering in a corner. That wasn't good. She was drying her hair, at least. She jumped in surprise when she saw me enter, but she slowly relaxed when she realized who it was. Here, these are for you, I said as I handed over the bag of clothes. The sales clerk had gift-wrapped it nicely, despite my protestations. And I'd been too nonplussed. Nonplussed? I guess that's a word. Not familiar with it. I'll have to look that one up. I'm assuming non-caring? I don't know. I like to learn words. So I'm going to write that down. To really argue. Everything went quiet. So quiet, in fact, that I swore I could hear the girl blink. Then, timidly, she took the bag. She inspected it carefully, skimming her fingers across every surface. Apparently, it was to her liking, because then she started opening it up. She carefully undid the ribbon and gingerly worried the tape off the wrapping paper. After neatly folding the wrapping paper and setting it aside, she reached into the bag and pulled out a white one-piece dress. There was something akin to shock in her eyes when she looked up at me. I'm not sure if it will fit you, but please, go ahead. Her eyes flitted toward me, then back to the dress. When she turned to me again, there was a hesitant smile on her lips. Sure, it was only for a second, but it was the first real smile I'd seen from her. Cause enough for relief. At the same time, her obvious happiness over the clothes made me feel a little guilty that I'd spent so little time and effort picking it out. "Oh, if you want to change, you should go in there." I pointed to the bathroom. The girl nodded happily, scooped up the dress, and ran off. Interesting. I'd never seen her so animated before. Well, he's had fairly minimal interaction with her, so it's kind of interesting that he would say that he would comment on seeing something new about her. I sat back and opened up the book I'd been reading. I hadn't gotten that far when I heard the sound of the bathroom door opening. Did it fit? Not too big or small? All she did in response was to bow deeply, her way of saying thank you, probably. I went back to reading. She, on the other hand, started to explore my apartment on her own. It didn't take her long. My place was pretty small. Eventually, she came back and sat at my feet. She was really quiet about it, so quiet that I didn't even notice her come back in. That, and I was too absorbed in the book by then. So the next time I looked up, I was surprised to find her staring up at me. She quickly averted her gaze when I stared back at her. Over the course of the next hour or so, this kept happening. The third time around, I finally let out a sigh and said to her, "You want to read something too?" She shrunk away from me for a second, but then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Well, all my books are on that shelf over there. You're welcome to read any one you want." She remained still for a minute or two, but curiosity finally got the better of her, and she walked over to where all my books were. She came running back seconds later, with my biggest book in her hands. I had to wonder whether she'd really get anything out of reading something like that, but I didn't say a word. She started flipping through the pages, an intense and earnest expression rippling through her face. She was obviously interested in the subject matter, and I was obviously interested in her mannerisms. Anyway, it'd be rude to interrupt her, so I held my peace. The next time I looked up from my book, it was already dark out. How long had we been at this? This was a good time to make dinner, as any. After all, I was starved. She looked up from her book with a questioning expression on her face. "Oh, don't mind me." To which she nodded and returned to her book. I went into the kitchen. There was still some soup left over from lunch. I heated that up a bit, poured generous portions into 2 cups, and sliced up some bread. Then I put everything on a tray along with some spoons and carried it all into the living room. "Go ahead and eat whenever you get hungry, okay?" I put the tray down next to her. She turned to me and nodded, but she went straight back to her book after that. She was obviously too engrossed to be interested in anything else at the moment. Okay, so unless this book was written in another language, my language theory is, incorrect. And if it's one of his largest and most complex books, then her being a simpleton, also incorrect. She, I guess, is just timid and doesn't like talking, or doesn't feel like talking. And as for me, well, I was pleased that someone would find one of my books to be so fascinating, which was why I picked up my cup and went from reading my book to watching her full time. Watching someone read. The irony. I'll leave it at that. The moon was high in the night sky by now. My guest was obviously having a hard time keeping awake. Her eyes were drooping, and she started nodding off, only to snap back awake every so often. And, this will probably sound horrible, but I found this kind of amusing. It wasn't long before she was sound asleep on the floor, curled up in a ball. Not that I blamed her. She'd had an action-packed day, after all. She'd been chased around town without knowing what was going on, and then she'd ended up in the care of a total stranger. She hadn't complained the entire time. I was proud of her. So I scooped her up, gently, so she wouldn't wake, and tucked her into my bed. Then I brought the book she'd been reading and set it by the pillow. After that was all done, I sat back in my chair and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Soon enough, I heard the stamp of footsteps coming up the stairs, and then a loud knock on the door. I'd been expecting this. I opened up, and sure enough, Annalie was standing there. "Good evening. Tell me, seen a stray kitten lately? A cute one?" He asked, with one of those good-natured dirty old man grins that I hated with a vengeance, so I glared before I let him in. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I asked, pointing in the direction of the bed, but Annalie did not answer me. Instead, he kept staring at the sleeping girl with a tender warmth in his eyes. "Now, I am your guest, am I not? Have some tea for me, or something?" Great. Didn't look like I had a choice in the matter, so I put some coffee on. I handed him a cup. He took it and started drinking greedily. Only after he'd finished his first cup and had a refill in his hands did he start talking. "Was busy today, couldn't go check up on her, so I had her come to your place. Trusted you wouldn't kick her out. You didn't. Good. However, never pegged you for a pedophile. Hands off. Clear?" Well, we don't know how old she is, but that's the second time that they've dropped that word, and I'm hoping that neither of them have those kind of intentions towards her if she is of substantially younger age than either of them. So Blackiris has certainly never exhibited those kind of tendencies up until this point, and he seems to be overall good-natured. So if he did, then certainly that would be radically character changing. And Annalie, this is the first time that we're really interacting with him, but yeah. Hopefully that's not something that we're really gonna. Hopefully that's just gonna be mentioned here and not really something that gets dealt with. I would imagine that if those actually are Annalie's intentions, Blackiris is probably gonna throw him out. That would be my guess, because Blackiris does seem to be a good guy. So, anyway. Clear. Annalie nodded. He seemed positively relieved, for some reason. "This is your daughter, or your granddaughter?" "No, no blood relation. I just look after her, because." "At your place?" "No, too much surveillance around my suite at HQ. The old church, the basement. She lives there. No one will find her that way." I looked over to our sleeping beauty with new respect. She'd been living there, all alone? That was crazy. Reading? He discovered the book on the pillow when he drew near to the bed. He looked down at the title page for a minute and then said, "Difficult, this book. Highly technical, more likely to give you a headache than any enjoyment. Better this than one of the books you wrote. Thank you very much." And she really was reading this. Looked like she was enjoying it a great deal, as a matter of fact. I retorted, as I thought back to how she'd hardly touched her dinner because she was so engrossed in the book. Annalie shot me a ridiculously happy smile in response. Good. Been worried, see. She doesn't express interest in much. I read to her every night. Don't know whether she's listening or not. You? You read a book to her? No kidding, huh? I'd never have guessed. Agreed. But she must have been listening, otherwise she wouldn't be able to read this at all. Annalie said, as he ran his fingers gently through the sleeping girl's hair, but he pulled away a matter of seconds later when she started to stir in bed. It wouldn't do to wake her, after all. Then exactly who and what is she? There's something a little, no, really off-kilter about her, don't you think? I didn't really know whether it was an appropriate thing to ask, but damn it, after the trouble he'd put me through, I didn't care anymore. Very well, there's a certain place, a couple that lives there. This is their daughter. They kept her locked up in a room ever since she was little. Hold it. They loved her, in their very own way. They had no idea what to do with her, or something. So I took her. Parents are better off. She's better off. Win-win. Problem, no monicide protocol permit. Had to hide her, so that's the story, okay? But that doesn't make this situation any less weird. I mean, you, out of the kindness of your heart, unbelievable. Ha! Harsh, but also true. He said with a laugh, but then his eyes narrowed. All trace of kindly old man evaporated that instant, giving way to the cold, calculating alpha of omegas that I knew so well. Indeed, I'm not doing this out of charity. I'll have my use for her soon enough. Line? You just imagined something wicked and evil, didn't you? No, not at all. I was too shocked to say anything more, so I concentrated on drinking my coffee instead. Annalie, on the other hand, went back to pretending to be a kindly old man, except there was this twinkle in his eyes. Clearly, he found toying with me to be fun. Why did you send her to me? Don't make me repeat myself. Thought I could trust you, besides. Didn't know if you were alive. Sent her to check up on that. 2 birds with 1 stone, see? I'm alive, thank you very much. So I see. Congratulations. That was always the excuse he gave for his visits, to see if I was still alive. I had no idea what was really going on in that brain of his, and I didn't care either. Best not to ask questions. Shouldn't you get awfully tired of checking up on me at some point? I asked with full sarcasm, but Annalie just shot me this strange and almost sad look. Not at all. Had a pupil like you once, stubborn as a mule. Liked him. He didn't like me one bit, though. So, was he asking me to like him? In this student's place? No way was I going to do that. Because his harmless old man act was just that. An act. In actuality, This guy was as dangerous as a pit of vipers, and then some. You wouldn't want him to turn your back. You wouldn't want to turn your back to him in broad daylight, let alone in a dark alley. Besides, I could never get bored of watching you. Now that's creepy right there. You say you don't care about anything, but that's not quite true. Deep inside, you still think you can change things. You haven't thrown hope away yet. Absolutely fascinating. I glared daggers at him. He didn't look impressed, and sure enough, I hadn't managed to shut him up. Pneumonicide killed you. Then it brought you back. In the middle, there you are. I don't recall asking for psychoanalysis, thank you very much. Oh, my apologies, bad habit of mine. I sighed. He didn't have to tell me, I already knew. Since he kept on apologizing profusely, I eventually waved him off. All right, I understand. Your secret is safe. I won't say a word. So, what'll you do now? Wake her up and take her home? Let's see. Need to be at my place by dawn, otherwise they'll get suspicious. Oh well, let's wake her now. Or let's wake her. Annalie called out to her, "Hey, wake up." But the interesting thing was, there was one thing he wasn't saying. Her name? What's her name, anyway? Doesn't have one. Didn't give her one. She's my project, not my daughter. Doesn't need a name. He replied with a vague smile. But the thing was, there was something so tender about the way he was looking at her. The girl opened her eyes and smiled at Annalie with obvious relief. Then she got up out of bed and scampered after him. He was already heading out the door. Thanks for everything. I'll bring you something next time. Sure. The girl shot me a look before walking down the stairs and out of sight. I smiled back because for a moment she seemed desperately lonely and said, "Oh, she's going to speak." Oh, Blackiris is going to speak. Feel free to come back and read my books whenever you like. Her eyes opened wide in surprise. Then she blushed and managed a happy smile before turning to leave. Okay, so on that note, what we're going to do is take a break for this one. And man, I gotta admit, I'm a little confused. I mean, we did have that scene here at the beginning of this video, where Law was holding Blackiris, and he said that he was her patient. Now, maybe he just meant that kind of metaphorically or something like that. I'm going to have to read that part again. Maybe he didn't mean in terms of or her guest. I'm going to have to read that part again. If he said that he was her guest or whether she was taking care of him in that particular sense, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure whether that was a dream and this appears to be a memory, right? We're looking back at this, I think. So this is setting up some context. So he passes out in her lap and is remembering this. So if at the end of the last episode or the last video, Blackiris passes out and maybe Law ran back to him because I guess maybe she decided that she did not want to leave him. I'm just spitballing here. I don't know. I'm really confused right now. Maybe she decided that she did not want to leave him, comes back. Whatever was going on with him that I'm still thinking that Dexter was the cause of. That seems to me to be the most plausible. And as he's fading, she's holding him. He's fading, and then this is what he falls into, and this is the memory that he's dragging up as he falls into. I mean, I don't know. I'm really confused. But gee whiz. And I guess that's, man, I don't know. This is wild. But I guess we're gonna go ahead and continue with that. Wow. But okay then. So all that being said, if you like this video, then remember to drop it a like. And if you liked it a lot and you want to see the rest of this visual novel or anything else that I may be playing on this channel, and you are not currently subscribed, then remember to subscribe as well if you're so inclined. But regardless, as always, thanks so much for watching, and we're going to be picking up right here next time.